Hello there, my name is Anthony Barocas from StreamTech, and today we're going to take a look at the Blackmagic Design Studio Camera 4K. And we are taking a look at the Studio 4K, which is the third iteration. We had the original 10-inch screen, we had the micros, and now we have this model. And I have to say they are really packing a lot of capability in there. Especially, we have the demands, as they call them, the demands. We have the zoom controller and the focus controller here so that we can take a look at how these work with this camera in a studio configuration. On the front of this thing, I've got a Canon lens that is converted with a Metabones down to the micro four thirds mount. I have long said, if you're going to make a studio camera, it would be nice to be able to use a Studio ENG lens with a B4 mount. And Blackmagic was the first on-shoulder camera to come with a camera with a native B4 mount, so you can use thousands upon thousands of lenses that are out there, just most of them sitting dormant from ENG cameras that aren't being used, and now you can use them on an on-shoulder camera. I'd love to see the B4 mount appear on the studio camera and have a lens port so that you can remotely control the iris and other features of the lens. Then you can even convert zoom and focus controls out to the lens. We'll get to that a little bit more in a moment. Quick walk around this camera. This is the higher end one. This has got SDI in, SDI out, as well as HDMI. I'm going to be using, for this demonstration purposes, I'm going to be using the HDMI, and this camera is one of the ones that you can remotely paint the camera with the HDMI or SDI, and there's Ethernet on here, and the HDMI supports video, tally, camera control, and even a record trigger, so that you can use the USB-C on the opposite side for recording 4K RAW from this camera. Next, it has 12G SDI, so you can connect it to any of the ATEM switchers that use SDI. And then with the SDI, you get camera video, and there's a second one, SDI in, for program return, and the program return also includes tally, talkback, and remote camera control. Or you can use Ethernet. Now, this Ethernet connection doesn't just get you camera video and program return and tally and talkback, but it can actually power the camera as well. Now, this is not NDI. Blackmagic hasn't suddenly changed their tune and now support NDI. But using the Blackmagic Studio Converter, you can use conveniently accessible Ethernet to handle the camera feed, the return program feed, timecode, genlock, tally, comms, camera control, and power for the camera too. Way cheaper than fiber or Triax or anything else, but it's all on one wire and it's super convenient. Down here you've got a 12 volt and you also have a 4-pin 12 volt connection as well. On the opposite side you've got two USB-Cs with little screw locks that come with the cables that come with the demands. They screw in so they're not going to pop out. You have left and right channel 1 and channel 2 XLRs, and then you have a 5-pin headset connection, as well as down here you've got little 3.5 millimeter jacks for microphone and headset. So if you want to use a consumer headset in here, you plug it down here, not obviously in the big 5-pin XLR, but if you have a big telex type headset, then you would plug that in up here in the 5-pin. And then of course, if you're just going to use a little lavalier microphone or something like that, you can plug that in right down here, as opposed to you having to convert it to XLR up here. A really cool feature I found with this model is the fact that it doesn't just have these teeny little microphone holes and they're not on top or behind or wherever. It's got two big microphone capsules and they're spaced apart with the lens mount in between. So if you're going to come from the right-hand side of the camera, it easily gets this one, and the camera block actually blocks that microphone from the sound. And similarly, sound from this side hits this microphone easily and is blocked from this side. So you really get some good true stereo separation in this camera. And you don't have to use this as a studio camera. You can literally just not connect studio and just connect a recorder and use this as a 4K recorder camera in Blackmagic RAW that just happens to have this beautiful 7-inch screen. Let's take a look at that. The Blackmagic comes with this screen protector, which is also your hood. So you just pop this out, and there you go. You can see the tally light in here that the operator can see. It says on air. You can see my focus peaking. And then obviously you can also see the tally light that whoever's in front of the camera is going to see. They come with little numbers you can pop in here, which is handy. Over here, you've got 3 function keys, as well as looking at program. I'm not feeding any program back, so there's nothing there, but you can look at the program return, function 1, function 2, function 3. Oh, function 1 is popping in. Over here, you've got your brightness, contrast, and a peaking control, which is very common for, you know, people who are used to using studio cameras to be able to like really dial up how visible focus is, so that when you hit focus, you can really see it peak. Let me rotate the camera here. You can see it. It makes it really evident when something comes into focus. In focus, out of focus, in focus, out of focus. And then also down here on the zoom handle, there's a button so you can pop in 1:1 while you hold it, and then I can easily see and then pop back out. Now that's just for my camera view. That's not for what's being sent out. I'm going to take this cover off. It just pops off easily with a little button on the bottom. And I'll fold that up. Again, this is fantastic in terms of also packing, because you're protecting the screen completely. You're protecting the knobs. It's ready for packing, which is a really great feature for people who have to travel a lot. Up here, you can see my frames per second, and I can adjust that. Shutter speed, my iris, which I cannot adjust because I'm using a Canon lens with a metabones converter, and that one has the aperture adjustment on the metabones converter. You see my time code, my gain, I can adjust the gain here. White balance, I can set white balance auto or continuously adjusting. And then the rightmost takes you right into the menu where you can adjust your recording settings, your monitor settings, your audio settings, and you can see the microphones in here are picking me up. And then multiple pages of setup, which I'm not going to get into. Presets, so if you're doing LUTs, you can actually record raw, but look at it with a LUT, and this is where you would load your LUTs. Out of the menu. Down here, you've got a histogram, which is always live, except when you go to adjust your shutter, now you can't see the histogram. So again, I've talked about this before, where adjusting and control takes away the meter on the camera that you would use to adjust your exposure. You can't see the meter when you're adjusting the shutter or the iris or your frames per second. Any of those things which affect the brightness of your image, you can't actually see the graph on the screen when you call those up. I would love to see this histogram move up when I go to adjust one of the settings that is going to affect the exposure. But hopefully in a future upgrade, we'll see that. Anyway, down here is your record button. It says I have no drives because you've got 2 USB connections. You can have 2 drives. And then your audio, again, if you touch on your audio, you can easily get to adjust your input levels and your headphone level. And that's a quick walk around this part. These controls are what Blackmagic calls demands, and you will find them, if you search B&H for Canon lens demands or Fujinon lens demands, you'll find them that way too. I'm just used to calling them controls. Here you're able to zoom, you have your trigger, and you have a speed control. These are very well built. The polish and the engineering that went into making these things is fantastic. They easily screw on, either slide on or they swing around, and then you can easily attach it. Underneath, like I says, you've got your ability to punch in for close focus. And then on the very bottom, there's a return feed as well, so that if you are doing video and it's being put picture in picture and you're being windowed into a little box, you can hit this button and it'll bring up the return feed onto your screen so that you don't have to reach up to the screen. Your hand is already on the zoom control and your index finger is naturally falling on this button, so you could easily pop up and see the actual program. It has 2 USB-C connections right here, both of them locking, and this will pass through. Both of these have 2 connections, and both of these will pass through in either direction. You could use just one, you could use both, you could come out of the camera and go separately to the focus and to the zoom, or like I did, I came to the zoom and then I went from the zoom to the focus. The focus demand looks a little different. If you've ever seen focus controls, usually they are a rotating pole that will physically rotate gears to rotate the focus on a Fujinon or Canon lens, and that's a physical mechanical. This is an electronic method. You'll see this more often on studio box lenses where you're electronically talking to motors that are inside of the housing, and rotating this rotates the focus. This will work with micro four thirds lenses. This does not work with this Canon lens through the metabones. I don't know which adapters will enable this to work with Canon lenses, but I do have a micro four thirds Olympus lens to show off some of these capabilities. I have an Olympus still camera here with a micro four thirds lens from Olympus that is one of the very few lenses out there in the world that will actually take full advantage of the demands that Blackmagic has created here. I wish that this was somehow leveraged to work with broadcast ENG lenses, because this lens, this tiny little pancake lens here, is one of 4 lenses made that will not just let you remotely focus, but this actually has a motorized zoom in it. And let me put this on here, turn the camera on. And now, when I use the zoom control, you can see the lens is actually moving on its own, which is what you would see if you had an ENG lens with a 17x zoom and is parfocal and constant aperture. This is not constant aperture. This is not parfocal. This is a still lens. So leveraging the capability in a still lens is, I don't know, it's cool, but at the same time, this only has one zoom speed, and you're not going to just suddenly zoom in and stop. I mean, that doesn't have a great look to it. It's nice that, here, let me swing it back around, and I can zoom out, and I can zoom in. But the issue is it's a 3x zoom. It's not a whole lot of zooming. Like if I'm doing a talk show, this is great, but you're not going to use this for sports because it really doesn't have a long enough zoom. Also, the difference between slow speed and fast speed is actually exactly the same, because there is only one speed. These lenses don't have 7 or more different speeds that you could ramp through so that you could smoothly start zooming and then smoothly come to a stop. That's a downside to these still lenses. And you can see right here, I can rotate the focus, and when I hit that focus, you can see it just snap right there. So focusing is just very nice. I have to admit, focusing is very nice. The zoom demand is very polished. It works exactly like if you're coming from a real studio situation. It works exactly like you think it should, and how you're used to using it, and being able to punch in and really see what that looks like right there, and then punch out. So if you want to change your shot in between, being cut to, you cut away, get a medium shot, cut away, go get a close up, cut back to me. That's how this could be used, and you can always check your focus, rotate your focus, and get that. So it really does facilitate that type of situation. But again, with this lens, the selection of lenses that have motorized zooms in them is very, very limited. Yes, you can use any micro four thirds lens on here, and there's hundreds and hundreds of them from numerous manufacturers, but you're only going to find 2 lenses from Panasonic and 2 lenses from Olympus that are motorized, this being one of them. And apparently when it's connected, you can't manually zoom the lens using the zoom ring on the front. So the camera must take over the control so that you can do it from here. The camera is great. The screen is great. using it in a studio situation with this, you don't have to add another monitor. Like, so many little studio cameras come with teeny little viewfinders. You're done. You have the whole camera here. In terms of packing it, this is all you've got to pack, and then you have different lenses that you can put on the front. But this is not very big at all. And it's easy to set up. It's easy to administer. It's easy to work with. The tally is beautiful. Having the screen built in and the screen protector is fantastic. And easy access to like your most basic controls that you're going to need. Like, it's super bright. I need to adjust the brightness or the contrast. That's super great. And then you've got these very well built and well thought out controls that enable you to control the lens. Now, the focus will work with micro four thirds lenses, and there's hundreds of them out there that you will be able to like do your focus. But the zoom control, this fantastic piece of hardware, works with 4 lenses, 4. And it beguiles my mind that that amount of engineering went into a product that just does not have as much usefulness as me as a studio camera operator would love to have. I'd love to be able to put a Fujinon on here or put a Canon on here, and a Canon B4 lens, put one of those lenses on the front of here, plug the lens cable into the camera to power it and give it iris control, and then have a secondary cable, and you'd have a different cable because Canon and Fujinon have different connections. You'd have a secondary cable to go from the camera to the zoom control, and then you could use this control and the speed, which I mentioned before. The speed control would actually have something to do. It's great to have a speed control here, but unless you're using a lens that actually has more than one speed, this doesn't do anything. So it just seems like so much potential and so much capability, yet limiting it to micro four thirds lenses on a micro four thirds mount on a studio camera. It's an almost. It's like, oh, so close. And Blackmagic has the Osee broadcast. It's a B4 mount camera. It's not this. It doesn't have USB-C to work with these demands. So you've got something on one hand and you've got the other half on this half. You get this half and that half. I would love to see Blackmagic put them together. Make a broadcast or B4 mount on the studio camera that has the connections, and then you can use these demands, and oh my goodness, all the pieces coming together finally, that would be fantastic. The other half of production is usually what happens in the truck. And Blackmagic has been just blowing away the competition in terms of you can get this tiny little Blackmagic 810 Mini, and you can then leverage the software and do full image control remotely to the camera. And this works over HDMI. So you're not limited to just the SDI cameras and the SDI switchers anymore. This works over HDMI through the 810 Mini to the camera. And up here, you can see I've got my preview, my program from the 810 Mini. This is the quad split out. You can see my audio up here. And down here on the computer, I have the 810 software control panel, and I have it set on the camera control. And from here, I can take this and I can adjust the camera settings for each of the 4 cameras. So you can have somebody dedicated, and normally in a broadcast truck, each of those camera control units is going to be thousands of dollars. And here you can take a $500 laptop. It doesn't have to have a whole lot of graphics power because you're just moving sliders and controls. It's not a really heavy processing task. You can get several laptops. You have one person doing camera control, and then you can have a second person over here doing audio mixing, and it has built-in Fairlight. So you're able to do a lot of processing as well, clean up the audio, run an EQ on each channel. Yes, you could do basic up down over here, but to be able to really get into it, this is real audio mixing on this end. That in addition to, you have somebody switching here, but you could also have somebody can be managing media. And lastly, you've got your switcher. Now, a lot of this functionality is accessible directly on the buttons, and I am a big button kind of person, so trying to switch a show on a screen is really hard for me. Being able to just leave your fingers on the buttons, watch the show, and punch between the cameras without even having to look, that is fantastic. So technically, you're getting the control surface first, and then you can add software. as opposed to having software and then adding a control surface. It's all actually happening in the control surface, in the hardware. The software, however, lets you do a lot of things, like you can initiate your records, which would actually tell this to record or pass it through to the camera to tell the camera to record. And then you could also do your macros. So if you have a complex thing and you want to have 4 cameras with 4 green screens and 4 different backgrounds, you can actually macro that so that it happens so fast that it's literally just punching the buttons. You can build that macro here. This is like where you do all your programming and engineering. This is your live switch tool, and those are your cameras out there. And it's a really nice package in terms of putting together a studio and having so much capability and so much functionality. It's not just the camera. The camera's good. The camera screen is great. Being able to record 4K RAW is great. But the real magic of the Blackmagic Studio cameras is the ecosystem. The ability to take that camera, bring it into a switcher. Okay, that's really cool. But then I can remotely control the camera through the switcher and paint it like I am working in a broadcast ENG truck and I have CCUs, or camera control units. 4 of them. I mean, that's at least $4,000 worth of capability. You know, I don't have a control surface. Those are expensive, but being able to like paint the cameras, get them to match, you know, from different parts of a studio, from different, you know, parts of a stadium is very, very powerful. The Blackmagic Studio Camera is not just about the camera. The camera is great, but the Blackmagic Studio cameras is about the ecosystem, and it is a very nice ecosystem. If you're looking to get into multi-camera live switch production and you don't already have cameras and you're looking to step into things, the ATEM line of switchers is a great entry into that. And then to know that if you get the Blackmagic cameras, they work beautifully with the ATEM switchers, augmented with computers that are reaching through the switcher and talking to the cameras, talking to the switchers, recorders, seeing everything. It's just a very nice polished system. Well, that's been my look at the new Blackmagic Studio Camera 4K. It is a great piece of hardware. There's lots of evolution, lots of capability built into it, but also as part of the Blackmagic ecosystem, it just really fits in nicely. I hope, as I've said, that they come out with one more with a B4 mount and connectivity and cables and everything to really make use of the huge amount of B4 lenses that are out there and put them back into use in studio production. Till then, my name is Anthony Barocas. Thanks for watching.